To take a closer look, we're joined on set by Chris Moore. Chris, the party of the Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has come out on top. It's the biggest party in Parliament, but challenges ahead.
That's right. It's a bit of a bittersweet victory, I think, for him. A big personal success. He got nearly 29% of the vote, up on around 23 last time. So that's obviously good for him. Also, at the same time, his rivals on the mainstream right, the PP, really imploding, less than half the seats that they got last time round. But as you said, the maths of it all are going to be a bit of a headache for Mr. Sanchez. You can see the Spanish Parliament there, 350 seats. That means that 176 is the magic number in terms of putting a governing coalition together. A few options available to the Prime Minister. First of all, he could team up with the mainstream right, Ciudadanos. That would take him over that Rubicon that we were talking about. But it's, coalitions are not unusual in European politics, but they're not exactly natural, the Grand Coalition in Germany, that kind of thing. But they're not exactly natural bedfellows. These two, Mr. Sanchez's supporters, many of them wouldn't be happy with that as an alliance. Things got pretty vitriolic between the two of them during the campaign over Catalonia. Another option is to team up with one of his coalition partners in the outgoing government, Podemos. But as you can see, that only gets him up to 165. Even if you then add in various smaller regional parties, he's still just shy of that 176 total without calling on the help of Catalan parties, which could be a bit of a headache for him.
Well, you mentioned there, of course, Catalonia. Isn't really in the headlines internationally anymore, but clearly a big issue in these elections.
That's right. It was really out of the headlines back in the crisis during 2017, during which time it's receded, as you say, as an international issue, but still very emotive in Spain. You have to remember that 12 of those leaders are on trial in Madrid for declaring independence in Catalonia during that crisis. Back in 2017, including Oriol Junqueras, the centre-left Catalan leader whose bloc got 15 seats in all of this, potential ally. But as I said, it's been vitriolic. The mainstream right has been after Sanchez, accusing him of collaborating with people who they've described as the enemies of Spain. And that, in terms of criticism, is pretty soft compared to what the Vox Party have been saying.
Indeed, and let's take a closer look, Chris, at the Vox Party and the rise of the right in Spain. It took less than a lot of its supporters hoped, but still around 10% of the vote. Is that significant then?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Santiago Abascal, the leader of Vox, comes from the mainstream right. He denies that the party is in any way far right, but it's been hitting the same issues as other similar, for want of a better word, populist parties across Europe. A focus on Islam, a focus on immigration. Spain, obviously, traditionally Catholic country. There's been a focus on opposition to abortion. And gay marriage. He's also talked about making Spain great again. Where have we heard that kind of rhetoric before? As you said, this is always going to raise eyebrows in Spain. It is only 24 seats, but obviously the memory of an authoritarian military government is a less distant one in Spain than in other parts of Europe. This party has emerged pretty quickly, first of all in Andalusia, and now stepping into the parliament. Obviously, 24 seats is not huge, but like with other similar parties, there's always the potential for them to lead the debate like that, although perhaps now less so, seeing as they're not likely to be part of a governing coalition as they could have been if the right had done rather better.
But eyebrows nonetheless being raised beyond Spain, and a lot of people looking ahead saying, well, is this a sign of what we might see a little bit later on in the month, in May or rather next month, in the European elections?
Well, it does fit into a pattern, doesn't it? These there's no secret that parties like these have been doing increasingly well of late. You've got Marine Le Pen here in France, Matteo Salvini, of course, in Italy. Two problems for these kind of parties are going to be, first of all, they've kind of started in a way falling out among themselves over what particular brand of nationalism they believe in. And at the second time, is the extent to which they actually reflect voters' concerns. It was interesting what we saw in Spain this time round. A survey showing that the vast majority of Spaniards are not really interested in immigration as the most important issue in this election. It was all about unemployment. Here in France, the Gilets jaunes, their detractors have said that they're in some cases Le Pen voters, far-right voters. But during that big debate here in France, immigration didn't really feature that heavily. What they have been successful at, of course, is tapping into people's discontent with the mainstream parties. And it remains to be seen at what point that tops out. These parties are expected in some cases to get around about 25% of the vote in those European elections.
Okay, as often the case, the economy seems to be the root cause
when it comes down to it,
the root issue for a lot of us. Chris, thanks a lot for that comprehensive look at the situation in Spain.